Hi everyone, welcome to Carolina's Book Talks, and today I'm going to be book talking This Book is Full of Spiders, Seriously Dude, Don't Touch It by David Wong. But before I get started on that, how about I tell you guys a little bit about the genre of horror, and more specifically the subgenre of horror, humor horror / comedy horror that this book falls into. So, horror is all about fear, stories about the other, paranormal, supernatural monsters, things like zombies. Usually imagined horrors and not real ones. However, I have seen things like pandemics that kind of tiptoe on the line. Most of the time there's this kind of otherworldliness that, the pandemic was brought by an alien, or it ends up ultimately leading to like a zombie apocalypse. The setting is usually very dark and gloomy, and setting is usually a bigger component most of the time, and it's very heavily character driven, and there's usually elements of suspense and thriller. Some appeal factors in this genre are the curiosity of being able to experience fear in a safe environment. I know my best friend, she loves watching horror movies, and I've asked her why, because I can't stand horror movies. And she says it's because of that exactly, that she loves to be able to experience this sensation from the comfort of her own home. There's other appeals such as escapism and testing your comfort levels, but also emotional reaction. So, fear, but as well as almost like so much emotional stimulation that you even might become like a little bit sad or cry. I've seen it happen. And then there's the elements of surprise, and sometimes the story is never really this is apparently like a big factor, is that the story is never usually resolved. However, that seems to be weird because most people say that they like need that kind of closure. And then in the specific comedy horror, humor horror, the deadpan humor that usually is accompanied kind of nullifies that the gruesomeness, because there is usually a lot of gruesomeness in comedy horror, and they kind of like combat each other and almost cancel each other out, so it's more bearable. So people like me who don't really like horror are able to experience it. So some significant authors, you guessed it, Stephen King and Clive Barker, but more specifically in the subgenre of humor horror would be Christopher Moore and Seth Grahame-Smith, who is the one who's been recreating things like Pride, Prejudice, and Zombies. So, This Book is Full of Spiders, Seriously Dude, Don't Touch It by David Wong. Early one morning, like so early that you're not even sure whether it's morning yet or it's still evening, David feels Molly touching his dog, touching his leg underneath the covers. But then he notices that Molly is actually across the room in the corner, so, oh my god, by the H, is touching his leg. So sheets fly and objects get thrown, and David catches a glimpse of this silver, spidery, bug-looking thing, and he tries to shoot it. So obviously the neighbors call the cops on him. And then the cops come, but they can't see what is clearly squirming around under this laundry basket. But David can see it. And the cop thinks that David's crazy. So what's going on here? But then the little spidery thing escapes, and suddenly it's crawling all up the cop's body, and David's just watching it like, what's happening? And then suddenly it's going into the cop's nose, and he's convulsing, and he's like, oh my god. And then suddenly that basically leads to an epidemic of these silver spidery things all over the town of Undisclosed. So Undisclosed is what we call it. David Wong does not relinquish any information about the name of the place, just for the safety of the townspeople of Undisclosed. So now it's up to David to save Undisclosed and ultimately the world from these silver spidery things. And he does it with a lot of swearing, guns, a teleporting bathroom, crazy time-stopping drugs, and faithful old Molly. So if you like the deadpan humor of a 20-something-year-old who kind of hates his life and doesn't really want to have all these responsibilities of fighting people and killing people to save the world, then this is the book for you. So I'm going to do something a little bit more unconventional. I've been doing this thing where I kind of like just grab whatever books and figure out that they are a sequel or a later part, and then work my way backwards. But I think a lot of authors have realized that now, that people don't necessarily read things in succession. So I found that a lot of books have, whether fiction or nonfiction, have made it so that you can read them at any point in any order, and it's not that big of a deal. So saying that, my first read-alike is John Dies at the End by David Wong. So similar, obviously, same author. So David Wong is one hell of an unreliable narrator. He's weird, he's antisocial, he sees things like ghosts, knows things like how much change is in your pocket and what the date stamp is on that change, and tends to lie or be sarcastic. But one thing is that he's really intriguing. You know, you usually want to follow him and his best friend John on whatever adventure they partake, because like it's just so crazy and idiotic that you can't even believe what you're reading. Like it's like B horror movie, like John Carpenter type stuff. Like you're just like, this is just so crazy, I just can't stop. So David was always a little bit weird, but most of these traits now have come after he tries a drug called soy sauce that he got from a Jamaican dude at a party who ends up gruesomely torn to bits. So yeah, don't worry, the violence, it's there for sure. So this stuff is like really crazy and has super weird side effects that I've never heard of any drug in real life having. And as per the title, John gets himself into a little bit of trouble, so David is on the mission to help him, but the roadblocks just keep coming. This is one of those books where you think it's leading in one direction, but then does like this complete 180 and goes in another direction, like some crazy, weird, funny, gruesome, very gruesome roller coaster. The next book, as a read-alike, is My Best Friend's Exorcism by Grady Hendrix. So it's not your usual comedy horror. It's a little bit more of paranormal, but it's kind of kitschy because it's set in the 80s, not written in the 80s, but set in the 80s, and it follows like 15-year-old girls. So you know, that kind of humor. So at around high school, girls get a little bit weird, their bodies start changing, hormone levels start like going all over the place, and clothing styles do weird things, especially in the 80s. But there's something a little strange about Abby's best friend, Gretchen. After losing Gretchen one night for a couple of hours at the beach, they find her, but she's been changed. She won't shower, she looks really gross, she's always fully clothed, no matter how warm it is, like full sleeves, leggings, whatnot. But apparently Abby's like the only one who cares about this, because all the other kids and adults are trying to pretend like there's nothing happening, haha. So it's all up to Abby to save her best friend, and she's determined to do it no matter what it takes, as you can see by the title. So the next read-alike that I have is Paul is Dead, The British Zombie Invasion by Alan Goldsher. And Alan Goldsher is actually a music journalist, so he's a pretty knowledgeable person to be writing a book like this. So it's absolutely hilarious because it takes the phenomena of Beatlemania and creates this alternate universe where the Beatles were zombies, and except for Ringo, though. Ringo is a ninja lord, and so is Yoko. So it's hilariously titled because it plays off the urban legend of Paul McCartney is Dead, which happened around 1966, whenever the Beatles were kind of laying low and Paul McCartney moved to Scotland, I believe. So this journalist one day was looking at the Abbey Road poster And he was like, let's make something up. Nothing is happening in the news today. So he made the statement that Paul McCartney was dead, and that you could see the message by the poster, because Paul McCartney, not in this image of course, but in the regular one, Paul is not wearing shoes because dead men don't wear shoes. He's also smoking a cigarette, the only one smoking a cigarette, because he's having his last cigarette. At the front, leading the troupe, is John Lennon, dressed in white with the beard, and apparently he's Jesus. Ringo was dressed in black with white, so he was the priest. And at the end, in the rear, was George Harrison, all in denim, looking a little scraggly, and apparently he was the grave digger. So it's really cool that Alan Goldsher has taken this and like just recreated it into this crazy, vicious story. So it all starts with John, who's a zombie, and then turns Paul, and then they turn George, so exactly in the way that they met in real life, and they basically eat their way to fame through a buffet of human flesh. But it's supposed to be realistic, so it's written in a way with interviews and newspaper clippings to make it seem more real. So Goldsher uses every bit of fact, fiction, and folklore to create this brilliantly funny yet super violent horror story. And it's especially funny, I guess, for people who are Beatles fans, which can you tell? So yeah, I found it absolutely hilarious. Now my last read-alike, I don't have a full physical copy because it was an ebook, but it is called Horrorstor. So there's no E on the end, and that last O has 2 dots on it, like the Swedish, I believe. And it's written by Grady Hendrix, so the same author as my best friend's Exorcism. So it's very much focused on setting, because it's set in an IKEA-esque store. So if IKEA has ever creeped you out, and it creeps me out, I don't like going there, then you might like this book, or you might not. So it takes place in this IKEA-esque store where the employees are going from their day-to-day activities in a kind of zoned out state, like most of North America. But one employee in particular, Amy, is trying to get the hell out of there, not because there's anything weird going on, but she's just done with the place, so she's trying to get transferred to another location. But she might not get there because one night the manager, her and a couple of other employees are doing an overnight shift to see who's been vandalizing the store at night. And while they're there, they uncover this crazy supernatural portal that lets in ghosts from a 19th century prison that was located in that same spot as the store. So from the day starting out of being like super bored with their lives, now it's a race to save Amy and her friend from total damnation. So again, it's similar to This Book is Full of Spiders, because following that kind of 20-something-year-old narrator who kind of hates their life and is a little bit sassy, and you know, there's a little bit of swearing and whatnot, so it's a very good read, and it was a very quick read too. I found it flowed very well, and also it's the physical copy of it I've seen is laid out like an IKEA catalog, so really funny. So I hope that you guys do read This Book is Full of Spiders, Seriously Don't Touch It, as well as the Readalikes, and I hope you really enjoy them. So happy reading, and I'll catch you guys later.